In Texas, they're going hog wild over wild hogs. The feral animals are causing hundreds of millions of dollars of damage.
Texas has an estimated 2.6 million feral hogs rooting through its farmland, more than any other state in the country. And for decades, every conventional method landowners threw at the problem barely made a dent. Conventional cage traps caught individual animals, sometimes just one curious juvenile at a time, while the rest of its family group, watching from the tree line, learned exactly what that particular trap looked like and simply avoided it from then on. Farmers were losing a war of attrition against an animal that reproduces faster than almost any other large mammal on the continent. Then, a trap design built around a completely different piece of logic began spreading across Texas ranches, and the math of the fight finally started shifting. Before we get into how that happened, if you're into real, deeply researched nature stories like this one, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. To understand why this new approach mattered, you first need to understand exactly why the old approach kept failing. Feral hogs are remarkably intelligent, social animals that live in family groups called sounders, typically made up of related sows and their offspring, ranging anywhere from a handful of animals up to 20 or 30 in a single group. A standard corral trap, the kind farmers had relied on for generations, works by luring hogs inside with bait and then triggering a single gate closure, usually the moment the first hog steps on a tripwire or pressure plate. The problem is timing. Hogs entering a trap rarely all commit to walking inside at exactly the same moment. Some hesitate at the entrance while others feed further in, which means a poorly timed trigger typically catches only the animals unlucky enough to already be inside when the gate falls, while the rest of the sounder, including the older, more cautious animals who tend to lead the group, scatter and, having now witnessed the trap in action, become measurably harder to catch again. Research studying conventional trapping methods has found capture rates hovering around 49% of a given local population, a number that sounds reasonable until you consider that biologists estimate landowners need to remove roughly 70 to 75% of a hog population every single year just to keep numbers from growing, given how quickly the species reproduces. The technology that changed this equation was developed not by farmers themselves, but by a small team of retired U.S. Army soldiers who founded a company called JAGER PRO in Georgia in 2006, led by a former Army Master Sergeant named Rod Pinkston. Pinkston had spent years in tactical military operations, including combat deployments where he used advanced thermal imaging and night vision technology to track and engage targets under difficult conditions. After retiring, he and his team essentially adapted the same strategic thinking, the same emphasis on patience, intelligence gathering, and precisely timed, coordinated action to an entirely different kind of target. Their solution, patented as the MINE trapping system, an acronym for manually initiated nuisance elimination, replaced the old single-trigger corral design with something closer to a surveillance operation. A large circular enclosure, typically around 32 feet in diameter and built from heavy welded steel panels, is set up at a bait site and left open for several days, sometimes weeks, allowing an entire sounder to grow comfortable feeding inside without ever being trapped, gradually eliminating the caution and trap-shy behavior that had doomed conventional traps for generations. A cellular-connected camera transmits live video of the site directly to the operator's phone or computer, allowing them to monitor exactly how many hogs are present and how the group behaves over time, all without a single visit to the site that might spook the animals into changing their pattern. The intelligence of the animals themselves is a significant part of why the old trapping methods failed so consistently and why the new approach had to be built around outsmarting that intelligence rather than simply overpowering it. Feral hogs share much of the same cognitive capacity as domestic pigs, widely considered among the more intelligent farm animals, capable of learning quickly from negative experiences and adjusting their behavior within a single generation. A sounder that loses even one member to a conventional trap tends to develop a lasting wariness toward anything resembling that trap's shape, smell, or location, a phenomenon wildlife managers commonly describe as trap-shy behavior. Once a group becomes trap-shy, catching any of its remaining members using the same method becomes dramatically harder, sometimes for the rest of that trap site's useful life. The whole sounder approach sidesteps this problem almost entirely by removing the entire group in a single coordinated action, leaving no surviving educated members behind to warn or influence any new hogs that might later move into the same territory. The critical difference comes at the moment of capture. Rather than relying on an automatic trigger that fires the instant the first hog wanders in, the entire trap is controlled remotely by a human operator watching the live feed, who waits, sometimes for hours, until every single member of the sounder has moved inside the enclosure before triggering the gates by hand from a phone, tablet, or dedicated remote control. That single change, shifting the decision of when to close the trap from an automatic mechanical trigger to a patient, camera-informed human judgment call, is what allows the system to capture entire family groups at once, rather than picking off individuals one at a time while educating the rest of the sounder to avoid future attempts, turning what used to be a game of chance into something closer to a deliberate, controlled operation. The results, once documented under controlled research conditions, were striking enough to reshape how the entire feral hog control industry approached the problem. JAGER Pro's own proof-of-concept research, conducted across a 5,000-acre property along Georgia's Flint River, recorded a 97.18% capture rate, dramatically outperforming the roughly 49% typical of conventional single-trigger traps. A separate but similarly designed competing system, marketed under the name Boarbuster, has documented capture rates around 88%, using largely the same whole sounder philosophy, an elevated, suspended net-style trap combined with the same remote camera monitoring and manually triggered drop mechanism. Industry figures involved in both systems have pointed to the same underlying statistic to explain why the difference matters so much in practice. Since landowners need to remove roughly 70% of a local hog population annually just to prevent it from growing, a trap capturing 88 to 97% of a sounder in a single, well-timed drop can genuinely reverse a population's trajectory, while a trap capturing under half typically cannot keep pace with reproduction no matter how many times it's redeployed. Thermal imaging technology has become an increasingly central part of how these operations locate hogs in the first place, particularly during nighttime hours when feral hogs, wary of daytime human activity, tend to do most of their feeding and movement. JAGER Pro's founders spent 3 years working directly with engineers from FLIR, a leading manufacturer of thermal optics, to develop commercial-grade thermal camera systems specifically adapted for hog control work, technology that allows operators to detect a hog's body heat signature through dense brush and near-total darkness, long before the animal could ever be seen with conventional lighting or night vision alone. Combined with the whole sounder trapping method, thermal detection allows landowners and professional hog control operators to locate active feeding sites accurately enough to place cameras and bait exactly where a sounder is most likely to return, rather than guessing at likely locations across acres of unfamiliar terrain. Word of the technology spread quickly among Texas landowners specifically, in large part because Texas's hog population dwarfed nearly every other state's and gave ranchers the strongest possible incentive to adopt whatever method actually worked. Customer testimonials collected directly by JAGER Pro read almost like case studies in the shift from conventional to whole sounder trapping. One Texas rancher described years of frustration using small cage traps and hunting alone, watching the hog population grow faster than his removal efforts could ever keep pace with, until switching to a remote camera and gate system in November of 2017. From that point through the time of his testimonial, he had captured 328 hogs, not as scattered individuals over years of effort, but repeatedly as complete or nearly complete sounders, exactly the outcome the whole sounder design had been built to produce. The scale of impact once this approach spread across enough properties has been documented at the level of entire regional populations, not just individual ranches. In one Georgia case specifically cited by the company as validation of the method, JAGER Pro was awarded a state environmental contract to eliminate the entire feral hog population from a 5,000-acre area near Vienna, Georgia, after hog activity had contributed to dangerously elevated fecal bacteria levels in a local creek. Using the whole sounder remote trapping method, the team removed 624 hogs across 76 separate trapping events, successfully clearing the target area entirely, a result the company has pointed to since as proof that coordinated, patient, whole group removal can achieve outcomes conventional trapping methods were never capable of reaching. Federal recognition of the scale of the feral hog problem has followed a similar trajectory to the private technology developed to fight it. The 2018 Farm Bill established a dedicated feral swine eradication and control pilot program, directing $75 million in mandatory funding across 5 fiscal years specifically toward combating the invasion nationwide. Half of that funding flows through the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service to provide direct financial assistance to farmers and landowners for on-farm trapping equipment and technology, while the remaining half supports USDA Wildlife Services in developing and deploying population reduction methods across the states hit hardest by the invasion. That federal investment reflects the same underlying math-driving private adoption of whole sounder trapping, with feral hogs causing an estimated $2 billion in agricultural and property damage nationwide every year, and with reproduction rates capable of offsetting all but the most aggressive removal efforts. Both government agencies and individual landowners have converged on the same conclusion that incremental one-animal-at-a-time control was never going to be enough. The design details separating the 2 major whole sounder trap systems on the market today reflect 2 slightly different engineering solutions to the same core problem. JAGER Pro's MINE system relies on a ground-level corral built from heavy welded steel panels, with gates measuring 8 feet wide and standing 68 inches tall, specifically sized to make escape by even a large adult boar essentially impossible once the gates drop, while still allowing hogs to feed comfortably along the enclosure's sides during the extended pre-baiting period. Boarbuster instead uses a suspended, elevated net-style enclosure that drops down over an entire feeding area from above, rather than relying on ground-level gates at all, a design its manufacturer argues further reduces the trap-shy behavior that plagues conventional traps, since hogs entering and exiting during the baiting phase never have to cross a threshold or navigate around a fixed perimeter structure the way they would with a traditional corral. Both systems converge on the same underlying strategy: patient remote monitoring followed by a single, manually triggered capture of the entire group, even though the physical mechanics of how each one actually closes around a sounder differ considerably. The reach of this technology is extended well beyond individual cattle ranches and row crop farms. Golf courses, state and national parks, and municipal water districts across Texas and the broader Southeast have all adopted whole sounder trapping systems to deal with hog damage on their own properties, from rooted-up fairways to contaminated reservoirs. The underlying appeal is the same regardless of the setting. A single well-executed trap deployment can remove an entire local population in one operation, rather than requiring repeated visits, extensive baiting, and the ongoing labor costs that made conventional trapping such a losing proposition for large properties in the first place. JAGER Pro's own promotional material points to a television partnership with the agricultural network RFD-TV, producing dozens of episodes annually documenting real traps. Deployments across multiple states, a level of public visibility that has helped popularize whole sounder trapping well beyond the relatively small community of professional wildlife control operators who first adopted it. None of this amounts to a complete solution to America's broader feral hog crisis, and the people running these programs have been candid about that limitation. The national feral hog population still sits somewhere between 6 and 9 million animals and continues expanding into new states almost every year, driven by the species' extraordinary reproductive rate and, in some cases, by illegal human relocation of hogs specifically to create new hunting opportunities. Even a trap capturing 97% of a single sounder does nothing to stop a neighboring untrapped sounder from moving in to fill the same territory within months, which is why wildlife management experts consistently emphasize that lasting control requires sustained, coordinated effort across entire regions and multiple adjacent properties, not just one well-designed trap on one ranch. The reproductive biology driving this entire arms race deserves its own explanation, since it is the reason no removal method, however clever, can ever fully declare victory over feral hogs the way Colorado's wildlife officials were eventually able to declare against a much smaller population. A female feral hog can begin breeding before she is even a year old and is capable of producing 2 litters annually, with each litter containing anywhere from 4 to 12 piglets. Under favorable conditions, a single breeding pair's descendants can theoretically multiply into hundreds of animals within just a few years. A growth curve so steep that researchers studying population control methods have consistently found even sustained, intensive removal efforts reduce populations by only a modest percentage each year in areas where hogs are already well established. Nowhere close to the 70 to 75% annual removal rate needed just to hold a population steady, let alone reduce it. What this technology genuinely represents is a case study in how a fundamentally simple insight, catch the whole family group at once instead of educating it one member at a time, can dramatically outperform decades of conventional practice once someone actually builds the tools to act on it. A group of retired soldiers who spent careers waiting patiently for the exact right moment to act on a target eventually applied that same discipline to an entirely different kind of adversary, and in doing so, gave Texas ranchers fighting the largest feral hog population in the country a genuinely better weapon than anything that had come before it. If you enjoy real, verified stories from the wild edges of nature, like this video, leave a comment letting me know what you thought and subscribe for more. I will see you in the next one.